Thank you very much for joining me on this very first CarrierDirect office hours. A little background, you may already know a little about me from FreightWaves, LinkedIn, or speaking at conferences as the director of engagement for CarrierDirect. So I'm about to tell you something that you already know about. Just feel free to skip ahead a little bit. We're consultants and we work exclusively in freight and transportation. And so we spend almost all of our time talking with carriers, brokers, 3PLs, shippers, and technology companies, from some of the largest players like FedEx and JB Hunt to some of the smallest. And those conversations are with everyone, from business leaders to entry level employees. And as a result, my teammates and I get a really varied perspective on the challenges that companies are facing at any given moment in time. For quite some time, we've been discussing internally the best way for us to share this perspective with as many people as possible to help the individuals tackle the very now problems they're facing. And the idea for the name like office hours came from my teammate and friend John Linger. And as he and I discussed how to use our unique position as the leading strategy and technology consulting firm in the space to help our community during the early stages of the coronavirus. And for some reason, the idea just crystallized perfectly in that moment. And so just as professors hold office hours to be available to answer questions and share perspective, like so can we. I certainly expect that this will evolve over time. So your feedback is incredibly valuable. It's almost invaluable. And the vision is that even after the virus, this will be a space where business leaders can join me and ask their questions about the problems they're facing in real time. And while the topics are best suited for business leaders, I'm a huge fan of sharing this information up, down, and sideways throughout an organization. Like, team members need to know more about the problems their leaders are facing and the struggles that the leaders have in solving those problems. So if you like what you hear, please definitely share this both up, down, and sideways. My promise to y'all, I will do my best to bring you perspective on how to think about problems in ways that you haven't, or in ways that maybe you've lost sight of. And my ask is that you hold me accountable. If I'm regurgitating useless information, let me know that I'm wasting your time. So about this episode. In the lead up to selecting today's topic, I crowdsourced some topics from LinkedIn, but mostly this comes from conversations I've had in the last 2 weeks with industry friends about the virus. And there are a couple of common topics, and a few of those I'll talk about today. And while this conversation will be through the lens of the virus, like, this advice should hold up really throughout your business. So I'll hit on 2 topics today, and then I'll leave you with a parting thought that I hope will get your gears turning and something maybe to be discussed in the industry. So the 2 topics I'm going to talk about today: employee communication and keeping and building culture. I'm going to start with communicating with employees during a crisis, right? First, let's frame the problem. You are probably already doing things to communicate with your employees right now that you haven't been doing previously, right? You're having more frequent all hands meetings, and you're constantly like messaging into your team and letting them know more that you are available for questions than maybe you ever have before. But still, as a business leader, you're communicating information that is at the same time difficult, unprecedented, and constantly changing. So I'm going to help you. Here are 2 of the biggest things to keep in mind when communicating with employees. Again, like, this is applicable every day, but it's especially true during a crisis. The number one thing that you can do is remember that your team members are people. This is the first example, as I said, of something that you might have lost sight of. These are challenging times for business leaders, and you are working on the best way to optimize keeping the business moving forward and sharing information, and recognizing this is also a challenging time for your employees. They are struggling on a personal level with the same things as you: working from home, perhaps being cooped up, constant news cycle, and family obligations that are different than they were before. And through all of the machinations that you're working on the best way to deliver the message that you need your employees to get, we see all the time that leaders lose sight of the fact that their people are people. Our advice: Don't craft your message. Don't overwork your messaging, which leads us to the second key in communicating through a crisis, which is be vulnerable. It's very unnatural for leaders to be vulnerable, but in a crisis, it's especially essential. So, how do you do that? Number one, speak truthfully. Don't message what you're unsure of. Spread rumors, or most importantly, do not provide false hope. Our tendency is to want to give good news or to say things that reassure people. We think that as leaders, that is our role in a crisis, and it is not. Our role in a crisis is to show that we are human and to be authentic. And authenticity is conveyed through openness. Our recommendation is to be completely open, honest, and candid. Give people the information that you have. This is not the time for, to use a Wizard of Oz analogy, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. This is a time to explain the information that you have, share openly, explain how you're evaluating the situation, not just the information you have. What were some of the challenges you faced? What are the factors that you're considering in sharing this information and where to go with the business? Here's how you reassure people: through your actions. Your words convey the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Your actions through crisis and through every day in your business is what reassures your employees. And in terms of being vulnerable, in follow-up conversations, review previously covered information and admit where you were wrong or where you made a mistake. Bring that to the forefront. That shows employees that they can trust you because you're not changing the message. You're not changing the narrative because it suits you. You're doing it because you're constantly taking in new information. Here's another piece. In terms of being vulnerable, make yourself available. Have office hours as an example. An always open door does not create a sense of urgency. And often employees don't want to bother you when there's a lot going on. This is even more true in a crisis, but we see it constantly. Well, I have an open door, but the employees are sitting on the floor struggling with things. They don't bring them to you because they don't know when the best time is. It's not easy enough to say, call me anytime. You're the most important thing. Let your team know that you are available, but set a specific time aside where they know your time will be wide open. Something like, I'm blocking off from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock every day just to talk to y'all. I'm available outside of that time if you need anything, but know that I will be doing nothing else during this time. So that if you're worried about wasting my time, you won't be. Because if you don't reach out, I'll just be there sitting there twiddling my thumbs. Now I'm going to talk about keeping your culture while remote and through a crisis. I cannot stress enough that this is going to have incredibly long-lasting and far-reaching impacts on your culture, this crisis. This is the most critical time in the history of your company for culture. Everyone will remember what happened during this time and how you as a leader handled it. Right now, many companies are trying to keep their head above the waterline. And unfortunately, that means much of the conversation skews toward the customers and the customer problems. And while many companies will survive the technical and fiscal challenges that are coming with this reality of the virus, there will be ones that die because of the long-term ramifications on their culture. This is an opportunity to either rebuild or reinforce your culture. Let's frame up the problem. Culture is built through both formal and informal means. Pizza parties and a Papa Shot are attempts at formal culture. The things that companies struggle with is the way to impact their informal culture building. I really want to be clear about what I'm not saying. I am not saying don't do a pizza party. I'm not saying don't have a Papa Shot. I'm not saying don't do Zoom happy hours. They're a great start. That's an informal, but that's a formal way to drive culture. How are you making sure that you drive culture that's not manufactured? What I am saying is do more. In addition to doing that, this is new territory for your people, as I talked about before. Right now, you're probably trying to figure out what they need. Let me tell you right now, you cannot. In every conversation I had over the last 2 weeks, each individual company had unique challenges from a people perspective. You cannot sit in the ivory tower and figure out what your individual employees need. So instead of sitting there and trying to figure out what they need on their own, call, ask, and listen. The number one thing that you can do is actually just talking to them in an informal way. Call your team members informally. Just ask how they're doing. And remember that when you do that, you really need to listen and hear what they're saying behind what they're saying. Here's an example. Let's say you call a team member and he shares with you that his partner is also working from home and has a ton of conference calls. You know this employee has children. This employee may be trying to raise his hand and tell you childcare is an issue and he needs flexibility. Listen to what he's saying and ask follow-up questions. You might be trying to figure out who to talk to. You want to touch your entire team if you can, and really even the ones that you think are rock solid. How do you figure out how to how do you figure out how to prioritize employees? Think about using the tools that you have right now in different ways. As an example, if you have an inside sales team and you're using a scorecarding tool like Ambition, look for employees whose performance has drastically changed. The conversation you have with them shouldn't be around their numbers. You should be talking to them about what the challenges are that they're facing. Don't bring up the numbers. Use the tool to identify the person who may be struggling. If you have drivers, think about tools like WorkHound, which is a driver feedback tool. WorkHound specifically, it starts off as anonymous, but allows the driver to raise their hand and say, I'd like someone to talk to me. All of your employees are struggling, especially your drivers. If you can't touch everyone and you're not sure which ones to touch, you don't have these tools, or you just really, really aren't sure, just remember the golden rule. Perfect is the enemy of the good. Do something, even if it's not the perfect solution. Now, this is my final thought. I want to bring up price gouging versus fair compensation. I don't really have an answer for this. In many of my conversations over the last 2 weeks or so, I've been asking business leaders, how are you coaching your team on this point? I have yet to hear consensus opinion, though, and it's a really, really complicated issue. Framing it up, in most natural disasters, we're used to dealing with, we're used to dealing with natural disasters. And the conversation of price gouging often comes up around consumer goods, right? There was recently a New York Times piece about a young man in Chattanooga price gouging on Amazon and eBay with hand sanitizer and toilet paper. Is this time different or is it the same? I mean, from a trucking perspective, the spot market has always been a great area for opportunity. And in most natural disasters, the impact is centralized, or the constraints on capacity are centralized, or the real risk to the drivers is somehow mitigated because the disaster has passed. But where's the line in fair compensation versus price gouging? It's not a conversation we really have. Trucking companies and brokers alike are rarely thinking about this problem, about customer pricing, outside of meeting the contract commitments kind of when possible. But the only focus that I've ever really heard around this topic is, intermediaries trying to be attuned to it from when third-party carriers are, escalating their rates in a way that doesn't make them feel good. If you have any thoughts, please share them with me or in the comments, reach out directly, or have this conversation internally within the industry. I think we need to figure out really where is that line so we can hold each other accountable and make sure we're doing the best thing for everyone. Thank you all for joining me today. For more from me and my teammates, check us out on LinkedIn, look for us in FreightWaves, or check out some other ideas from us on CarrierDirect.com/content. Like I said at the very beginning, I really want to hear your feedback. So feel free to comment below or email me at rschreiber@carrierdirect.com. And I look forward to hearing from you guys soon.